Yeah, hi, this is Jerry Cooney. I want to invite you to listen to me on my podcast, Sirius XM, with Randy Gordon, Mondays and Fridays. And I want to know how the Ringside Boxing Show is only number 2.
Live from Monterey on California's beautiful Central Coast, this is the Ringside Boxing Show. I'm Dennis Taylor, welcoming you to join me and my expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwan Zahid, and John J. Risbaki, today and every week for the hottest, sweatiest show on the West Coast. And now, from Studio 1A, it's the Ringside Boxing Show.
Welcome to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Glue and Truth Sports Network. I'm Dennis Taylor, and we've got a great show dead ahead. In a few minutes, John Risbaki and I will be interviewing a man who will be inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame this coming June at the age of 87. Tony DeMarco, the Boston Bomber, won the undisputed welterweight crown in 1955 from Johnny Saxton. Then he lost it 70 days later in the first of 2 epic brawls he fought with another Hall of Famer, Carmen Basilio. Both those fights were like Gotti Ward type fights, just unbelievable. If you haven't seen them, you got to check them out on YouTube. Tony fought 8 world champions during a 71-fight career that spanned 14 years, and he fought in an era when there were only 8 weight divisions. No alphabet soup sanctioning bodies, 8 world champions in 8 weight divisions. That was his era. In his hometown, Boston's North End, there is a section of Fleet Street that was renamed Tony DeMarco Way, and there's also a bronze statue of Tony DeMarco, one of only 2 on the North End. The other one is of Paul Revere, so that tells you what his hometown thinks of him. This conversation is one for the Smithsonian. Tony DeMarco is one of the last of his era, so don't miss this interview. It's coming up shortly. Paul McLaughlin, our inimitable British correspondent, is back this week to catch us up on what's been happening in the UK in the recent days, and there's plenty of that. And first we're going to talk to our expert analyst about Saturday's remarkable results over in the UK and also here in the U.S. Travis Hartman is a professional boxer, trainer, and promoter from Osborne, Missouri. He's now living and training in Orlando, Florida. Rizwan Zahid is a boxing journalist from Toronto. And John J. Risbaki is chief lead writer for MaxBoxing.com and DogHouseBoxing.com. And John and I are co-authors of the Amazon bestseller and a truly great stocking stuffer for the boxing fan and your family, Intimate Warfare, the true story of the Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward boxing trilogy. Okay, hey guys, we don't have Travis, so we got Riz and John today. A couple of huge upsets in boxing on Saturday. One was over in England where Josh Warrington stunned Carl Frampton. The other one was at Barclays Center in Brooklyn where Tony Harrison, who was an 8-1 betting dog, got a controversial decision over previously undefeated Jermell Charlo. So let's talk about those 2 first. Riz, I guess we'll start with you. Jermell Charlo was absolutely livid after suffering the first loss of his career to Harrison. A lot of the media who I saw scoring the fight online thought Charlo won. All 3 judges saw it for Harrison. I guess none of the 3 of us saw the fights, did we? Riz, you didn't see him, right?
No, I didn't. I read extensively about them. I was kind of following as the fight was going along.
That's where John and I are too. All 3 of us missed it. Man, what a bitter pill for Jermell. This was supposed to be a Charlo family celebration. You know, they're in the feature and the co-feature. Tony Harrison dropped a big steaming Yule log in the punch bowl last night. And what was your take about that? And also, Jermell Charlo's hard-fought win over Matt Korobov, who was an 11th-hour replacement for Willie Monroe. And that was after Monroe tested dirty. What a surprise, especially for Jermell. You know, you could understand why he was pissed off, just because he must have been embarrassed.
Seemed like the consensus from a lot of the media was that Charlo should have won. But I mean, there were still kind of a few out there who thought that Harrison won, but more just because he was kind of controlling the pace and making it ugly. But I think, win or lose, I don't think, I think this kind of says where the Charlos are. I mean, Tony Harrison, when this schedule came out, we all thought, okay, this is a walkover, right? This is this is an easy fight. So the fact that he wasn't able to knock him out, or even if he did win, it would look good. He looked awful. That's pretty telling too, right? It's not, sometimes it's win and look great next time, but I mean, this was even if he did win, even if a lot of the consensus was that he won, no one thought it was a wipeout by any means. It was not, it was an ugly fight. He didn't really make it look good, and it doesn't really say that he kind of is an elite fighter or anything like that. So it's just, it's just still a lot of potential there. But so I think the fact that even though people are surprised that even after all that he didn't get the W. It's kind of embarrassing for him to even have lost, but I mean, it says that the guys, the Danny Jacobs and the Canelos, who are kind of the other side of the fence on with Eddie Hearn and DAZN, it seemed like it was going to be difficult to make a matchup to begin with. Now it seems like maybe there's not necessarily a need for it, and this is also what happens when there's supposed to be a fight with Jared Hurd, and a fight that could have happened probably at least a year ago, probably should have actually happened last night. But for some reason it's not. And then Hurd apparently said, they were aiming for next fall. Why the hell are you guys waiting for another year? There's absolutely no reason why two fighters who are promoted within the same stable, same network, same division, same everything else, and who have fought on pretty much the same card, I think, a couple times. Why are they waiting and waiting? So I think there's a bit of karma here. And even though the judging is still questionable in boxing, and I don't think ever will stop being questionable, unfortunately. But this is what happens. I think there's a bit of karma here. So, Charlo's still saying he wants Jared Hurd, but and Harrison saying he wants a Jared Hurd rematch. For Hurd, you got to think, what is he thinking? I mean, if the Harrison rematch is a bigger fight for him, he can go and win that, and he can kind of get the Charlo thing out of the way. But I'm sure he's looking at Charlo thinking this is a much easier fight than I thought. Because I always said, I don't know how Hurd makes weight. He's a massive dude. But again, there's a lot of B-plus fights that are going on, and maybe sometimes when that happens, I think fighters get a little bored. They get a little bored in training camp. They're not bringing their effort, and then Tony Harrison, a guy who literally no one was talking about, approaches this as his big fight, his chance to really steal one, and that's how these upsets are kind of made. I mean, not obviously to the same extent, but that's what happened with Douglas and Tyson, right? It was all the talk was about one guy. No one really cared about the other guy, and that guy was going through some things, and he was more motivated than he'd ever been in his career. And maybe Harrison doesn't ever get another big win like this in his career, but this was his Douglas Tyson moment. Even if a lot of people thought he should have lost. Excuse me. Even the way Timothy Bradley beat Pacquiao, that's what a lot of people comparing it to, a fight that people thought Pacquiao won, but he didn't look necessarily great doing it. I think that's kind of where we are with this one. And then you go to the main event, and then we're kind of getting the other opposite of the spectrum, where no one thought that the scorecards were that wide. Korobov thinks he won. A lot of people thought it was very, very close. We have another judge who's giving it 11 rounds to 1, 10 rounds to 2, which it seems like that's just a permanent thing in boxing now. The quote-unquote house fighter gets one super favorable scorecard. And it just doesn't make sense how that keeps happening. So, I mean, I know it's not the same fighter, but, I mean, I don't know, karma kind of works in funny ways, right? You have one Charlo that probably should have won, didn't get the scorecards in his favor, and the other one gets one ridiculous card in his favor and managed to squeak to another two. So, judging is still and will always be an issue in boxing. It's not getting any better, unfortunately, and I don't know when it will get better. Excuse me. Excuse me. But it's definitely, there's definitely a certain amount of karma here, I think. This is what happens when you wait too long to make a fight. Regardless, one way or the other, things can be coming crashing down, whether it's an injury, whether it's a guy pulling off an upset, or whether it's just bad judging. And it's not the first time where the bad judging goes against the favorable fighter. It doesn't happen often. Usually it's obviously, the guy who's more popular gets the scores. That's what we see more often. But once in a while, you'll have a Bradley Pacquiao moment, and that's what we saw last night.
John, Riz just made just a great point, and that's that fighters get bored in training camp when they're not training for anybody who's they think is going to be at their level. And Travis is constantly saying that boxing. Travis, our professional boxer, constantly saying that boxing's 90% in your head. And we saw it last night with both of the Charlos. One of them loses. The other one had all he could handle with Matt Korobov, who was a last-minute sub, 11th hour. And I think both of them probably just thought it was going to be just a showcase for them, and that's kind of what happened. They both could have lost last night.
Yeah, and when you got your friends most likely telling you, these are just easy fights. You could win these with one hand tied behind your back. I mean, it happens like this in a lot. That was a great point that Riz made too. I totally agree. And I was kind of thinking the same thing because it can happen in other sports. I mean, you can have football, for example, where one team is the better team, at least you think, but they're not playing. They're just kind of like, yeah, we can beat these guys. We can sleepwalk through this. And the other team is like, hey, we want to really beat these guys. We want to make a point here. We want to beat them. And that's all it takes. It's just a little drop on one side, and the other team or boxer rises a little and fights better, and the upset happens. And it happens in boxing, and that's what makes it so fascinating. It like last night. I mean, from everything I've read. And Riz made another good point because this was supposed to be a showcase, and they failed. The Charlos failed. And I was wondering because I've seen video of them, I don't know when that was, a month ago. They seemed like they were pretty out of it, pretty drunk, and I was surprised by that. But that might be a factor too. Maybe they've lost their focus a little. Maybe and this leads into what we've been saying. They didn't train very hard for this fight, and they just thought, all I got to do is hit him once, and Jermall was going to fight Willie Monroe, and he probably figured, that's an easy one, and then he fights Korov, and he's a tough dude, But Jermall, it's got to be very disappointing for him, and he from what I read, he demanded a rematch, and Harrison said okay, so it might be a DeGale Rob Brand thing where they'll fight again soon if it happens, and this time Jermell Charlo will win. So you just, go, okay, it was just kind of a fluky thing, but still, that's very true in sports because you can be just kind of thinking you're training correctly, but your opponent is knocking himself out. I mean, it's the oldest story in sports, and there's probably some truth to that. Harrison figured this was might be his last shot, so he was ready. He got beat by Hurd, so he wanted to go, and from the highlights, I've watched the highlights. He was boxing well and jabbing well. It's just interesting, though, when you usually have this kind of a controversial fight, only usually, I say, not always, one judge tends to go the other way. And in this case, they all went with Harrison. I found that very interesting. And I think there's a video of the fight on YouTube, so I was planning on watching it, kind of scoring it myself. But not a good Christmas present for the Charlos, and I couldn't help but wonder too, if Jermall, after seeing his brother lose, if that was hard on him. He looked very disappointed and depressed in the locker room before he went out there to fight, and maybe that affected his performance a little too. So that could have been a factor. But yeah, this when they announced these fights, that's right. We were all like, this is ridiculous. This isn't even going to be competitive. And see, that's the thing. That's what makes sports, boxing, whatever, so wonderful or great is you can't always be too sure because these kind of things happen.
So, rematch. Who's favored, Jermell or Tony Harrison? Riz?
Ooh, I gotta go with Jermell still. I mean, Tony Harrison had. I think the difference is when one guy's going to get, bring everything on one night, he might be able to sneak out a win. And this, and Jermell, obviously, you can tell maybe he didn't have it. I think you see the difference between guys who have potential and guys who have talent and guys who are, trying to be great. And I think there's, the Charlos clearly have potential. Charlos are clearly athletic phenomenons who could do wonderful things in the sport, but I don't look at them as Errol Spence. And even though they're I think all of them are from Texas. Errol Spence, he's never. You'll never see Errol Spence, and I don't think you'll ever see him doing something, in a stupid video or anything like that. he always has this look of just like he's just ready, and I think that's kind of the difference you see here. So I mean, I think you might see kind of a DeGale-like performance, and maybe better. Maybe Jermell goes out and knocks him out and looks good doing it. But I mean, that was what he was expected to do anyways. So it's not really, I mean, if he knocks him out in the first round, great. But I think he has the ability to do so. But it doesn't really tell. I think this fight showed how to beat him in some ways because, I don't think Tony Harrison is the most difficult opponent in that division. I think that division has a lot of other more difficult fights. And the eventual fight I think is going to happen one way or another will be Jarrett Hurd. And I'm looking at Jarrett Hurd and thinking, this Jarrett Hurd's probably thinking like, wow, I can very comfortably beat this guy. And he's not just looking at I can definitely knock him out, but I think Jarrett Hurd's probably looking at it as like, okay, I think my boxing skills can do quite a lot here too. So I imagine that Jarrett Hurd's probably pushing for the fight maybe a little more now. We're kind of in a situation where the networks pretty much operate as different leagues, right? I don't think we're going to see a Daniel Jacobs-Charlo fight anytime soon. I don't think we're going to see Canelo fight any of the Charlos anytime soon. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Golovkin if he ends up signing with PBC, and maybe he gets one of the Charlos, because I'm sure he's looking at this and thinking, I could dust the floor with both of these guys. So there's definitely different avenues at play here. I mean, a rematch probably makes the most sense. But, I mean, the problem is we shouldn't be having this fight to begin with, and we're getting a rematch out of it. And that's pretty much, the guys fighting twice a year now, that's pretty much Charlo's calendar for a 12-month span, which is incredibly disappointing because this is, these are two guys that people generally were rooting for because they are entertaining guys. They are guys who could be in good fights, but that's not at all what we're getting. So instead we're getting kind of rematches against guys who they shouldn't be fighting to begin with, and that kind of holds up their division anymore. So for PBC, I think a rematch for PBC is actually really bad because it's going to tie them up even more. It's going to delay the inevitable fights, and while they're doing that, if the zone signs Golovkin or something like that, there's other huge fights that can be made. Obviously, if Canelo and Jacobs, that's just going to trump anything that PBC is going to be able to put on, at least in that division. So there's definitely pressure, I think, on PBC now, more than there was before. They're the ones who kind of started this whole network establishment, and it was great. People loved it. But the quality of fights really soured really quickly. And now the issue is, well, if these are the fights that they're putting on and they're going to have rematches for it, I don't think the demand is going to be there as much. I think they're still going to have numbers. People can still watch them, but I don't think anyone's going to look at their fighters as, the guys in the division. They're just going to look at them as they're very entertaining, good quality fighters, but they're not the greatest. They're not the best right now.
That is such good insight because, PBC, there's probably going to be a rematch between these two guys, and Jermell's going to come out just motivated as hell this next time, and he's vastly better fighter probably when he's motivated, and he's probably going to wipe this guy out in 2-3 rounds, and that'll really be an embarrassment for PBC. It was a who cares fight to begin with, and then it was an upset, and then it's a rematch, and then it's a blowout. That's going to be really bad. John, what did you see in the other monster upset across the pond, which was Josh Warrington's really surprising decision over Carl Frampton, who was a 2-1 favorite to win this fight. I don't think anybody saw this coming. Warrington basically outworked Frampton during the first half of a good fight, and then Frampton never caught up on the cards. What a surprise that one was. Were you surprised that happened?
Oh yeah, sure. I thought Frampton would win. I was surprised in the first round when Frampton seemed to be controlling the first couple of minutes, and then Warrington went into this, as an announcer said, Tasmanian Devil routine, and just started throwing punches. And Frampton and I both were shocked, and he didn't get hurt, but he got knocked back a step. And I thought, my God, this guy Warrington, he's faster than Frampton, and you just don't see that with the Jackal. He's usually faster than the guys he fights, and his footwork was surprisingly good. He's the real deal, Dennis. He really impressed me. He doesn't hit very hard, but he's so active and he's accurate, and he's so determined that I think, even though Frampton was total class afterwards, he said, I expected him. I think he did say one thing that was very revealing. He said, I didn't think he was this good. So he trained. He didn't want to say, look, I didn't take him very seriously and I didn't train very hard. He said he was in great shape and everything. It's also possible, and I didn't want to say this in my article because I hate speculating like this, and it might have been a fair point, though, that perhaps, because when I was watching it, I was thinking, it looks like Frampton might have lost something, you know, and now that might have just been Warrington. You know, Warrington was so active at times, because Frampton would be winning the round, and then Warrington would just start working, and he was faster. He'd get his punches off quicker. He'd hit Frampton more, and it was very surprising. So it's possible that Frampton might be on the backside of his career. Just suddenly, you know that old cliche about fighters get old overnight. I think that's possible, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's true because I don't want to take anything away from Warrington. He fought a really smart fight. He out-jabbed Frampton. The only thing is if he could punch, he'd have probably knocked him out because he hit him with some really, or at least knocked him down. He hit him with some really solid shots. So yeah, I was really surprised. Frampton started to come on, you know, in the second half, but he just couldn't catch him. And Warrington won 10-11, I think, just because of his activity. And Frampton looked like the older fighter. You know, he's only 31. He's only been in 28 fights, but Warrington was just too much for him. So, you know, all the props to Warrington, because, again, when he won the title over Lee Selby, I went, yeah, Selby was having problems making weight, and he looked very sluggish in there. But the guy is a good fighter, and he deserves our respect for sure, because he'll give anybody in that division trouble just because his almost kamikaze style, you know, where he's boxing real intelligently, he's got a high guard, and then suddenly he just gets close and he just starts firing punches, and I think that's something that surprises fighters. Now, it's not going to be a surprise so much anymore because they're going to expect it, but still, he's fast enough and quick enough that he still manages to surprise. So whoever he fights, if he fights, Frampton didn't ask for a rematch right away, which was surprising to me. I thought that was something he would want, but maybe the rumors that he was really seriously thinking about retirement are true, and he had a little bit of a problem getting up for this one, a little bit, not totally. Maybe he's going to retire, but it would seem like a natural for him to want a rematch, but he didn't say anything about that afterwards, just that he was going to go home and think about it. But, go ahead.
I was going to say, John, do you think he's actually a threat to somebody like Gary Russell or Leo Santa Cruz?
I think he's a threat to Leo Santa Cruz, yes, because he's so active. Wow. I think he would surprise Leo Santa Cruz, too. I think, just like I thought with Frampton, I think Leo Santa Cruz will beat him, but I think he can surprise. Gary Russell's so damn quick that I think he'd land 4 or 5 to 2 or 3 for Warrington. But, again, Warrington's also awkward. You know, awkwardness can also help because boxers aren't used to that. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. He's a surprising fighter. He's only got 6 knockouts in 28 fights, which is, you know, tells you that supposedly he can't break an egg. But Frampton said he hits pretty hard, and that's the oxymoron in a sense, is that here's a guy that's more of a pressure fighter at times during a round, but he's not a power puncher. You know, most of the time pressure fighters, as we know in boxing history, Joe Frazier, for example, they can knock you out with one punch. He just gets you with a flurry of blows. You know, he doesn't knock you out, but he hits these guys 7, 8, 9 times with punches, and they're just coming from their left hooks underneath or sweeping hooks or right hand. So I was surprised. I was just trying to do like I always do, Dennis, you know, like we do when we write about fights, just kind of stay detached in a way, but I kept going, wow, I certainly didn't expect this. And there were a couple times you could tell that when Frampton was sitting in his corner, he didn't expect this. So, again, all props to Warrington, who's going to be a tough fight for, I think, pretty much anybody that he fights next.
The other big fight, which was also on British soil, and, man, I just loved every minute of this, was the rematch between Dillian Whyte and Derek Chisora. just a bruising brawl between two guys who really battered each other for 11-plus rounds. Chisora was just a slight underdog coming in. He had a slim lead on 2 of the 3 scorecards in the 11th round when he was assessed with a penalty point for the second time in the fight. And it was only a few seconds later, Riz, that White connected with just a textbook left hook and scored a scary one-punch knockout. I'm wondering if that second penalty might have broken Chisora's concentration, because it just looked like he never saw that sucker coming. What did you see most of that fight, Riz?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I don't know if it actually ruined his concentration, but I think maybe it made him a little more eager, and maybe he thought, I just lost 2 points. I kind of have to make it up some way or another, and then he kind of walked into a shot. But I mean, I don't know. It was an interesting fight because it seemed like he was getting tired in maybe round 3 or 4, but there it was in round 10 and he was still bringing it. Not the same effect of those punches, but it was a very, very late candidate for knockout of the year because it's up there for sure. Yep. Chisora brought it, but this kind of reminded me of, I don't think anyone is going to say that either of these guys are better than Joshua or Wilder, but they are contenders and they are good fighters. And it kind of reminds me of, when the 1990s HBO belts that we used to see with, not necessarily with the guys like Lewis, but I mean, we would see, Tua and like David Eisen, and like Tua knocked out even John Ruiz way back. There was Michael Moore and I think David Tua. That was supposed to be a solid fight that I think lasted like 49 seconds or something. There's a lot of those kind of fights with Hasim Rahman and David Tua. You know what I mean? There's a lot of those really good, solid fights that happen. HBO Boxing After Dark kind of fights. Oleg Maskayev and Hasim Rahman, those kind of fights. And I think that's what yesterday reminded me of. It was a very good heavyweight scrap, which we didn't see for the Klitschko era mostly. And I think partially is because the fighters just weren't that very good. A lot of the fighters were out of shape, and C, Klitschko just made it look easy against all these guys. He didn't, I think when you look at all the struggles that Wilder and Joshua have already had in their reigns as champs, Klitschko never had anything like that, did he? He never struggled with the mover. He never struggled with the guy with power. You know what I mean? He for 10 years, he was untouchable. So, but you need this also. You need guys who are just, not the champs just carrying the division. You need the other guys. You need the guys who are just going to be in fun fights. And I think that's what Chisora and White are. They're guys who are, and I think, England especially has had tons of those kind of fighters, and they remember those guys, quite fondly. They remember the guys who were just entertaining and brought solid fights. And those guys, they get their crack at the big time. Dillian White's already fought Joshua once, and looks like he might fight him again. Chisora's fought David Haye. These guys have made still pretty good money in their careers also. So even if you're not the best, you can still be if not a star, you can still be a well-known commodity. And, we talked about guys like Willie Monroe who are maybe the second tier, but still get big fights, where guys like White and Chisora, rather, they're way more entertaining. And because of that, they're always going to be in demand. And they'll always have, they'll always have jobs in some ways, right? And that's what yesterday was. Really reminded me of those 90s, 2000s HBO belts that we kind of all, we all kind of remember, that we all have nostalgic feelings for. So it was a good fight, but I mean, I don't think anyone is thinking that Dillian White is going to be difficult for Joshua or for Wilder. I'd rather see Dillian White and Jarrell Miller, but I don't know if that's going to happen just yet.
Before we came on the air, before we went live today, John was saying that he doesn't think anybody in the heavyweight division is anything close to great. But, we got a really good division right now. We got essentially 3 undefeated champions on top, Joshua, Wilder, and Fury. We got White and Big Baby Miller and Luis Ortiz legitimately in the mix, I think. There's also Povetkin and Pulev and Parker and Brazil and Takam and Huey Fury and Chisora. And you got up-and-comers like this Adam Kaunaki, who's, 17-18-0, Joe Joyce, and this guy Filip Hrgovic, who was the prospect of the year for Sweet Science. And then you got Alexander Usyk, who's the cruiserweight king, who's got all the moves, and he's moving up to heavyweight. And there are echelons there. But, man, I just named 17 interesting, bankable guys who, if you happen to be a boxing promoter, John, I think you want them if you're a matchmaker or a promoter. And it's been a long time since we could say that. I think maybe my memory's foggy, but I don't know how far you've got to go back to find that many interesting guys, if not great guys, in the same heavyweight division. It's really come to life.
Oh yeah, for sure, and it's not meant to be such an insult like it sounds like. I mean, for one thing, it makes it really competitive. Everybody, even the three top guys, have flaws that we always talk about, which makes it that they could lose, which makes it very interesting. Having a great fighter like a Joe Louis or whatever, just blew through everybody and was barely ever got tested, like they said, the bum of the month. An interesting historical fact about that. A number of those guys he fought were really not bums. They were ranked in the top 5, and they were pretty good. He was just that much better. So I don't want to use the word parity, but it in a way it's better for almost always in sports when pretty much anybody can win. I mean, the odds are long sometimes, but when you have 17 guys and you have the top 3, and then you got 4, 5, 6, 7. They could pull off the upset and beat one of the top 3 guys. That really makes it where you don't want to miss the fights, because you don't want to miss that happens, because we love upsets, or they're always interesting, they're always stunning. It's the drama of the sport. So yeah, that's good in a sense. That it is the way it is. It makes it compelling. And I completely back up what I say. I don't think these guys are great fighters, but again, I don't care in a sense. It doesn't matter to me, because they don't have to be great. Their fights can turn out to be close to great just because the competition is so close that they bring out the best in each other, and that can really be good for boxing. And it can be like yesterday. I mean, it's a great example with Chisora and White. I mean, they're obviously not close to great. They're just probably pretty good, but they're pretty good to the point where they're close enough that if they fought 10 times in a row, it would most likely be competitive, at least 9 of those times, and that makes great watching. Like you were saying yesterday, Dennis, you were really enjoying watching it, and I was too, because it was give and take, and the first fight was the same way. They hurt each other, they wobbled each other back and forth, and this time Chisora was winning, so. It's good, and then the ending was kind of shocking. So again, it's good. It's great viewing. It's great entertainment, and it makes for compelling television, compelling boxing, and that's all good for the sport.
Okay, so if Joshua, Wilder, and Fury are the top 3, and of course they are, Riz, who's number 4? Who do you think's number 4 out of that whole bunch?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I think so. I'm going to say Jarrell Miller. I just think I think Jarrell Miller is something unique in the heavyweight division. I don't know if that's good or bad yet, but we got to see him against a live dog at this point, right? Because I think what we've seen from him says that, first of all, he's a massive person, massive personality too, but we've never seen a heavyweight this size, but he's pretty mobile and he can throw 800, 900 punches around. He's an athlete. He's definitely an athlete, just a little more different than the athletes we're used to seeing in boxing. Usually we see more the Deontay Wilder type of body. Usually we won't see guys like Jarrell Miller who are walking around 280, 290, but, who are so light on their feet, who can throw that many punches. But he's still relatively new to the sport. So it's, by comparison, does he have the same skill set? We've seen some elements. We've seen how he's grown. I feel like he sits on his punches more. So when he does, he's able to get guys out of there. But I think a Chisora and White fight, definitely against Dillian White. I don't think there's any point in him fighting Chisora. I think a fight against Dillian White will indicate kind of where he stands amongst that group. Or even against Joseph Parker. I want to see him against one of those because arguably I say that those guys top the top 6, I guess, in terms of experience, right? Usually we want to see guys, against former champs and former challengers, because it gives us an indication, it gives us a comparison, right? Jarrell Miller knocks out Joseph Parker in 2 rounds. The immediate thing we're going to do is compare him to, how Anthony Joshua did against Joseph Parker, and then naturally we see okay, well, you know what, maybe Jarrell Miller will cause Anthony Joshua some problems. You know, Jarrell Miller and because he's a massive person, he has, you know, shoulders that are just massive. I think he can absorb a lot of the punches that a lot of guys would get knocked out by. Against Joshua, at least. Wilder, freak of nature, totally different animal, who knows? I think a Jarrell Miller-Wilder fight could go, you know, 900 different ways, and it could mean both of them getting knocked out in the first round. So it's, I want to see Jarrell Miller in a big fight. I do. Because I think first of all, I love his personality. He's a very lovable person. It's hard to dislike the guy. But he also presents a different problem that I don't think any heavyweight fighter has seen in a very long time. They haven't fought a guy who's 300 pounds immobile, and that itself is a unique problem. And I really hope that we'll see him in one of the big fights, and hopefully we're going to see people against him, because I want to see how are they going to be able to handle someone like him, because it's such a I feel like everyone in the heavyweight division right now is something different. Joshua is 6'5", 240, is a developing skill set. He has, you know, unique athletic gifts, can combine a good amount of speed and power. Wilder's just an absolute freak of nature, does everything wrong except he has power, but the power makes up for every other flaw. And Jarrell Miller is just a massive person that if you don't knock out, if Joshua and Wilder can't knock you out, you know, how are you going to win? Because Fury has a style. Fury's going to outbox Joshua and Wilder, but no one ever thought that Fury would necessarily knock out Wilder or knock out Joshua. I don't think it would surprise me that much if Jarrell Miller is able to stop one of those guys. But, again, we can't really talk about that until we see him take that leap forward. And I hope we see that soon, because I want to see Jarrell Miller in a big fight. You know, well, I mean, he's like 320 pounds, so I guess every fight he's in is pretty big. Yep. But I want to see him in a fight that people want to see if he's going to be the next big contender, because you know, what makes legacies and what makes champions great is numerous defenses, but numerous defenses against guys who people deem as threats. And I think the question is Jarrell Miller a threat, or is he just another fighter? And until we see him take that next leap, we can't answer that question.
Yeah, and you know who else is really interesting, and we're going to have to wait a little bit to find out, just like Miller, but Alexander Usyk, John. How long are we going to have to wait for him to be a player in this division? He probably needs 2 or 3 heavyweight fights before he steps up to those guys, isn't he?
Well, 1 or 2 maybe. I don't know how he's 31. I don't know how long they're going to wait, but he's got the ability, he's got the talent. He wants to fight Joshua. That's just one of those mouth-watering fights, because Joshua's so much bigger, but Usyk's got such good talent. Can he stay away from Joshua's punches? Can he take them? He's never been hurt in any fight as a cruiserweight, but Joshua weighs 250 pounds, and man, he's a strong guy. Knock a house down with that right hand. But Usyk would hit him with shots that he might not see coming. So he's very good. I think he's thinking that he's almost like thinking in his mind this is like a lotto time, because he jumps up in the heavyweight division, he starts making a hell of a lot more money. So you can't blame him to think that way. He's the unified cruiserweight champion. He's got all the belts. So, and he did it the hard way. And this is a guy that had nothing given to him. I mean, he came out as an amateur with a sparkling record, and was immediately it was immediately suggested how good he was. And earlier in his career, I thought he was good, but I wasn't that impressed. But as I watched these fights on the road with him and saw his ability to adapt and change and win no matter what, that was just extremely impressive to me. And I'm going to give away a little spoiler. I might have mentioned it, but he's my fighter of the year because of what he accomplished. Yeah, on the road. You don't see that. You know, a lot of guys won't do that, go on the road like that, unless they're forced into it. And he took every challenge that was put in front of him. Can he take the ultimate challenge with guys that are so much bigger? You know, he's 6'3", probably get up to about 220. Interesting thing is he's actually way more than Wilder did. Wilder weighed 212. I think Wilder's going to weigh more the next time he fights Fury, if he fights him soon, or in 2019. So he'll be shorter, but again, he's got the technique. He's technically more sound than those guys. So he's really compelling, Dennis. I can't wait to see how he does. I'm sure his first fight will probably be an easy one as a heavyweight, pretty easy, and he'll win, and then he'll move up. But, the danger is that sometimes you don't bring the same power when you move up, as we've seen with Lomachenko. Not that he's a big, powerful puncher, but you fight bigger guys, and that's a different kind of challenge. They take your punches and just look at you, and that's different. So, but again, he's got such a brain, that a boxer's brain, that you put him in there, he's going to figure it out. He's going to find a weakness. So I can't wait to see how he does, and that's what makes the heavyweight so interesting. Is you've got a mixture of guys like Riz was saying. Big Baby. I mean, Big Baby is a freak in the opposite, in a sense, of Fury. Fury is a freak at 6'9". Looks like he ought to be playing power forward in basketball, but he can move and do all that stuff and jab and feint and do that stuff so well. Big Baby also, for a guy who weighs 320 pounds, is extremely light on his feet, and it just blows your mind. You think, he's out of shape and all that, but he's not out of shape, because he never looks tired. So he's something that we haven't ever seen, I think, as a heavyweight as far as that goes. I don't think he punches nearly as hard as Wilder or Joshua, but he's got that other part of his game that they don't have. They get gassed, and I have never seen the guy tired. He went 12 rounds in his last fight, or no, the fight before that, and 12th round, he looked like he could have won another 12. So there are a lot of these little things about these guys that create these fights that you just, as a boxing fan, as a boxing writer, you think to yourself, man, I can't wait to see this. So, Usyk and all these other heavyweights, and it makes it very fascinating. It should be a great year in 2019.
Yeah, Big Baby is just such an intriguing fighter, just because of his, he's a coke machine with a head, and you guys remember when William the Refrigerator Perry fought Manute Bol in celebrity boxing? Remember that?
Talking to a Bears fan here, awkward. Dennis, so you know that.
I mean, who would have given Manute Bol any chance against William the Refrigerator Perry? The guy was what, 7'6" and about 83 pounds, and he
about 90 pounds. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. William the Refrigerator Perry never got in a punch on him. It was hilarious. So, okay, hey, last one for you guys, and I don't expect either one of you to have an answer to this, but Oscar De La Hoya said Friday that he's got a shock in store for Canelo Alvarez fans when they announce who his May 4th opponent is going to be. To me, that statement is as ominous as it is intriguing. It could mean Callum Smith at 168 or Danny Jacobs, but I think it could also mean some MMA farce, in this day and age with boxing. Any theories, Riz?
Based on Canelo's history, I'm not really going to be shocked if it's another mediocre opponent, because I think they said you'll be surprised to see he's returning in December against Rocky Fielding. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's. To be honest, I'll be very surprised if it's a legit opponent. I'll be surprised if it's David Lemieux or Jacobs, if he's saying something like this. I think you're right. I think I wouldn't be surprised if it's some kind of joke of a fight. I doubt it's a Callum Smith fight. I would absolutely love that, and I would give Canelo huge props for taking something like that, because that's even though I think Canelo has I think Canelo has the ability to clear out both 160 and 168. He's that talented, but still to fight Callum Smith in your second fight, like that'd be impressive. Like, I'd be shocked if he did that, and good for him if he does. But I don't know if he would do that. But my theory is, especially with Oscar's history, when he's saying we have a major announcement, usually it's not really a great announcement. Mayweather's most recent announcement was an MMA fight that wasn't an MMA fight, that was an MMA fight, that is now just a 3-round exhibition boxing fight against a guy who's 30 pounds lighter than him. So usually now when it's a surprise, it's not really a surprise I'm very surprised about, sadly.
John, you got a guess? You got a gut feeling?
Well, when I was sitting here, Dennis, I was thinking, maybe it's going to be, it's Oscar. Oscar's going to get in there with a ring and they're going to fight an exhibition, of course, which is obviously ridiculous. It's Oscar being a promoter. I agree. If Canelo was to fight Smith, that would be a shock just because he was fighting him again or fighting him next. I think Canelo said he was going back to middleweight after this fight, and then he mentioned something about catch weight. So whatever it is, it's probably going to be something we're going to roll our eyes at or something because, you know, it's disappointing in a way. I have to say this about Oscar De La Hoya because I had the privilege of interviewing him years ago, and he pretty much told me that he wasn't going to play these kind of games. He wasn't going to be the typical promoter. He was going to try to get his fighters good fights. He wasn't going to, in his words, make a mockery of the sport in some ways with some of the things he did. And he like sold his soul to the devil in a sense that he's just like a lot of the promoters that you lose respect for because that's all they are. So anytime they say something, you take it with a grain of salt, and that's disappointing. So I would say that I don't know who Canelo's going to fight next. We all want to see him fight Jacobs next. If he thinks that's a shocking call or decision, that's fine because we might be shocked because that's his next fight. And that would be good. And maybe there's a seriousness to this. That the shock is that it's not going to be a pushover fight. It's going to be a good fight. It's going to be against Danny Jacobs. I mean, Jacobs was at Canelo's last fight. Who knows? And if that's the case, that's good. You know, I hope that's it. But so difficult with boxing to take anything that seriously, but I'm going to try to hope that that's what it is. But yeah, I think it's probably going to be some announcement when we talk about it next week and we have Travis here or whatever, we're going to go, that's it. So something anticlimactic, but you know, maybe we're going to be wrong. So hopefully we will be.
You know what would fit the description? Mayweather. Canelo Mayweather on May 4th. But I can't imagine that Mayweather, with his ego, would allow Oscar to make that announcement.
Exactly.
You know,
and he hates Oscar. Yeah, he hates him. So there's no way in the world he'd let him. And Oscar hates him. There's no way in the world that they would be able to agree on anything. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. I won't have a question for you guys on this, but apparently encouraging news about Adonis Stevenson. His girlfriend said on Saturday that he has awakened from a medically induced coma and that he's on the mend. So that's better news than the news we got 2 days earlier from his promoter, Yvonne Michel, who said he was still in a coma and unimproved. And which version is true, we will have to wait and see. But, you know, at least we got that going for us. So that's nice. I want to let our fans know about that. All right, that's John J. Responti, Rizwan Zahid on the Ringside Boxing Show. They're our expert analysts. They're with us every week, and they're the best in the business. Thank you, guys.
All right, take care, guys.
All right. Our British correspondent, Paul McLaughlin's coming up next. He's got lots to talk about today, and we'll be back with Paul in a minute. And then John Responti and I are going to be talking to a living legend from the 1950s, Tony DeMarco, who is going into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in June. Stay with us. We'll be right back with all of that.
You're listening to the Ringside Boxing Show, the hottest, sweatiest show on West Coast radio.
Oh boy, is this great!
Hi there, it's Paul McLaughlin with your weekly roundup of everything going on in the UK boxing scene at the moment. Well, what a night last night. Dillian Whyte brutally knocked out Derek Chisora with a huge left hook to settle their heavyweight grudge rematch at the O2 Arena. The match had been as pulsating as the first fight 2 years ago, which Whyte had won by split decision, but their rivalry was conclusively ended in the 11th round. Whyte whipped a counter left that sent Chisora careering backwards and ended a brutal fight in a flash. Here's what Dillian Whyte said after the fight.
For me, it was hard, so I said about discipline. I said I take my time. I hurt him in the first round, and I thought, you know what, go off there and go after him. And I said, hey man, relax. You got 12 rounds to do this. You know, I know the main thing is being in control, taking my time. I'm boxing my way, and I knew it would come. You know, I knew they trained for my left foot. They kept on mentioning it. So I worked on the right hand. I hit him with the right hand a few times. I rotted him. Then I thought, you know what? I noticed he kept on making the same mistake. He kept on bobbing and weaving my 1-2 left foot. So I threw a lazy right hand and just dipped a bit.
Boom.
He was then joined by AJ to talk about a potential rematch.
Dylan, let's forget about what happened in the past in that fight. British level, we're both at world level now, and we can see what we're about. Do you know what I mean? Forget all that he said, she said. Good fight back then, now we have to see where we're at right now. But first of all, we know how the list goes, number 1, number 2, and if they're not available, let's see if we can get on. If anyone deserves a white title shot, I think it's Dylan. I'm going to say we're waiting for you. We need to know what we're doing. I've got my own career. I'm not waiting for you to change Adam, man. Even with fighting, we're not fighting, bro. I know where you're coming from, but as I said, if there's anyone who deserves a shot, if it ain't them, it's you. So if it wasn't Deontay Wilder, let me ask you a question. If it wasn't Deontay Wilder, it's a fan-friendly sport, would they be interested in Dillian Whyte? So if Dillian Whyte's fight gets made, I don't want to hear any boos and it's not the fight we want to see. Do you know where I'm coming from? Deontay Wilder's a target, but if it's not him, it's Dillian Whyte.
And White was clearly unhappy. He stormed out of the ring and back to the dressing room. Elsewhere on the bill, a cracking fight from Charlie Edwards, who boxed brilliantly to take the WBC flyweight world title away from Christopher Rosales. The Croydon man, having lost out on his first bid for a world title at the same venue 2 years ago, came through a pulsating battle at the second time of asking, putting on a masterful display to take a 118-110, 117-111, 116-112 unanimous points decision. A fantastic performance from the man. Edwards, now 14-1, was not short of emotions afterwards.
That's for you, Mum. That's for you. Always believed in me. When she revealed she told me never to give up on my dream, I'm going to get there. That's my mum. Well, when I got the cut, I was a bit like, first cut in the pro ring. So I was on top of my head and it didn't really bother me. I kept getting on the club and I just kept putting in his eyes. Behind him with it instead of by myself. I just want to say a massive thank you to Grant Smith. He's turned me into a different fighter now. My new trainer, Grant Smith. The last year we were working together, he believed in me, he's given me 120%. I'm so obsessed with this sport. I live it day in, day out. When I haven't got a fight, I'm depressed. So I'm always hounding to try and get out. But you know what? Some things, it's a blessing in disguise. Maybe that's time out. Maybe readjust things. Recuperate myself and get with the right man.
Elsewhere on the bill, there were first round wins for Joshua Buatsi against Roland Quinlan, and David Price marked another comeback against Tom Little, although Little protested that the fight was prematurely stopped. And away from the O2, a stunning fight between Josh Warrington and Carl Frampton saw Warrington win by unanimous decision. All in all, a fantastic night for boxing in the UK yet again, and there will be plenty more next year. Right, that's your lot from me this week. In the meantime, gloves up and protect yourselves at all times, and happy Christmas to all the listeners out there. I'll see you next week. Back to the studio.
Hey, what a smoking hot boxing scene in the UK. Thank you, Paul McLaughlin. You enjoy it, and you have a Merry Christmas yourself. All right, we're going to take one more quick break and then come back with living legend Tony DeMarco. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Dennis Taylor, host of the Ringside Boxing Show, where since 2008 we have been continuously sponsored by Garcia Boxing, the first family of the sweet science on California's beautiful Central Coast. Trainers Max and Sam Garcia and ring strategist Dean Hamilton are regarded among the most knowledgeable in the game. And Kathy Garcia, who manages all Garcia boxing fighters, is renowned for her integrity and career guidance, having taken 2 boxers to #1 world rankings. Together they comprise one of the most respected teams in the sport. Learn more by calling 831-261-3214 or send them an email at garciaboxing25@aol.com.
Welcome back to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Green Truth Sports Network. I'm Dennis Taylor with John J. Risponti, and today we're reconnecting with a legendary boxing fighter who we interviewed on the show back in January of 2012, and we're thrilled to have him back because Tony DeMarco, the Boston Bomber, will be inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame this coming June in Kansas City, New York. Tony won the undisputed welterweight championship of the world in April of 1955 from Johnny Saxton of Boston Gardens. And then after 70 days later, he faced a two epic brawls that he fought with the great Carmen Basilio. Tony compiled a record of 58, 12, and 1 with 33 knockouts over a 14-year career, during which he fought 8 world champions at a time when boxing had only 8 weight divisions. And only one champion for weight division. Many people can't relate to that anymore. But again, that's the way it worked out for him. That was a tough world back then. And the Melbourne to Boston, where he still makes his home, there's a bronze statue of him on a section of Fleet Street that has been renamed Tony DeMarco Way. Tony, we also had a mention that you're going to celebrate your 87th birthday on January 14th. So let's do the first to wish you a happy birthday. How are you doing?
Well, thank you. Very best wish. Appreciate that. And I'm on roads that's come on now. It's been a long time.
Humbled.
And I'm flattered. I'm certainly flattered.
Tony, what kind of moment was it for you when you got the news that you were going to be inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame this coming June? What kind of day was that for you when you got that news?
What was it like? When you got the news?
Well, I'm still flattered, really. It's a great thing. It's a great honor. And, boxing's always been close to my heart. And I'm fine. Very great.
Tony, here's something that a lot of boxing fans might not know about you. Tony DeMarco was not your birth name. You were born Leonardo Liotta, and everybody calls you Nardo. Tell us how you became Tony DeMarco. Tell us that story.
Well, the story is that I was still on to fight.
Professionally.
And in the days of, when I was 17 years old, you had to be 19, no, I was 16 years old. You had to be 19 years old. You had to be 19 to fight. And eventually I wasn't, so I decided to something that really kind of did didn't have their age correctly. So I was talking about my name, and I started my fight career as Tony DeMarco. And
Tony DeMarco was a buddy of yours, right?
Tony was a friend of mine. He himself boxed a little bit himself. And we were his friends, and he was 2-3 years older than I was, and that's how. That's it. That's the start of it.
Tony, what kind of place is Boston's North End when you were a kid?
December, and we will return your call as soon as we can. Thank you.
What kind
of place was the North End when you were a kid?
Well, it's funny, the whole thing it's kind of place, it's basically the same. People, we had all the Italians that grew up here in the North End. We had some chick ones, and And only those that grew up out then are trying to still keep in touch from time to time, you know?
Tony, you turned pro in October of 1948 at Boston Garden, which, obviously is historic, and you were 16, as you were saying earlier, and you knocked out a guy named Meteor Jones. Yeah. Did your parents know you were doing this? Did they know you were fighting that night?
No, I started fighting when I was a young boy, younger than that. I was 95 pounds when I was fighting with the Bones Limbs Foundation, an organization that was quite active, and that's when I started fighting. So I had 44 inches at 15. I fought the department, and I had more fights in the boys club. So I had fights for maybe 2-3 years prior to my amateur career. And of course, in those days, I fought on my railway.
I'm sorry, John. Did your parents know that you were going to fight as a pro at age 16, or was that a secret?
Well, in the beginning they didn't, but it was, I'm not sure. I was confronting because, everybody knew each other's moves were a lot of fun. And so my father against it, but I convinced him that it was my
feel good.
My position to survive, Okay. And of course, I convinced him that I was true.
I see. You had a knockout that night against Meteor Jones. Any memories of that fight, Tony?
That's a long time ago, but I think I fought Meteor Jones twice when I was thinking.
Really?
Yeah. And so
Do you remember how much you got paid for that fight?
Okay. That's a lot.
$10, stuff like that.
I never got paid.
Well,
no.
That's incredible.
No.
Well, we've got to ask you about your left hook because you were known for that, and there are some fighters that just can throw that beautiful left hook to the body, and you had it under the head. Where do you think that came from, that ability to throw that left hook?
Well, the boys fight, you box each other with people and guys, and then you develop that's why I started playing as a southpaw. And then when we went to my career, it was advisable that I should convert into a right-hander, because people didn't want to fight southpaws, and it hindered my career with some notion of that, and so that's it. So I became I started playing, and what it did maybe is kind of develop my left foot. Because in the beginning, the left foot was the power punch. I realized I got my of the year. And Manny Jones is the guy who fought first time and the second fight. The first and second fight. Yep. I fought Manny Jones.
Knocked him out both times.
The first round and the second round.
Wow. Hey, Tony, were you naturally left-handed? Do you right left-handed and throw a baseball left-handed?
No.
Oh, okay.
I have a right-hander. Firstly, I'm a right-hander, but for whatever reason, I can't tell you, but I fought in the southpaw. And when I was told that there's some advantage in playing the softball because people don't like to play softballs. And sure enough, my manager at the time, Leonardo Liotta, suggested that I should convert to a right-hander. And I did. And I would say it was the right thing to do. And I continue fighting. Right along.
This is the Ringside Boxing Show from Monterey, California. I'm Dennis Taylor with John J. Responte, and we're talking to one of the all-time greats, Tony DeMarco from Boston, Massachusetts. Tony, what I read about you this week on the Internet is that you and Joe DiMucci, who was a middleweight contender, were trained by Sammy Fuller, who was a former world welterweight champion.
Yes.
And this guy, I really wasn't familiar with Sammy Fuller, but this guy won his title from Kid Berg. He fought Tony Cantoneri, Barney Ross, Jimmy McGlarnon, Lou Ambers, Peter Jackson, so many others. What kind of guy and what kind of trainer was Sammy Fuller?
Well, Sammy was a good trainer, and it was advisable that he starts training me because there was some similarities with my style and his style. And the first I heard, as you mentioned, Sammy Fuller, who fought all these good fighters, and I'm not sure if he was champion or not, but he had some sort of a championship. Was on the championship. And he became a good trainer. He was a very good trainer.
Yeah, he was the world light welterweight champion. He won his title from Kid Berg. So, yeah, you're right. Tell me, what are your most vivid memories of the night that you won your world title from Johnny Saxton in April of 1955? What do you know about that night and that fight?
Well, prior to him, I fought some good fighters. I didn't go back. I fought some good fighters, and the way coming up, for Tony DeMarco, back when I was a namesake, and he was champion of the world also. And Robo also was a great fighter, a Robo fighter, and I fought him on meeting these fellows, and then Johnny Cesario, another good Robo fighter, and George Rojo. These are the guys that I fought prior to Jimmy Carter, prior to Johnny Saxton, rather. And then gradually, what happened to me was I fought Jimmy Carter, and I brought a minimum. They gave me the decision to draw. And it might have been a good thing because he gave me an incentive for Johnny Saxon to fight somebody that can't try to beat. And of course, I fought Johnny Saxon in April 1st, 1955, and I won the championship of the world. And I'll never forget. So.
There were rumors about Kid Gavilan and Jimmy Carter and some of the other guys that you went up against, that they were connected with the mob. And I'm wondering, did you have any brushes with guys like Frankie Carter or anybody else in the underworld?
Not at all. I know. They were around, but I imagine. But I remember they had to go technically with them. I was friendly. They were in front of everybody, and they knew everybody. And you know, and that was basically it. But they were fighting and we love each other. And so we get matches and players, you know.
Why do you think they left you alone? They gave Carmen a real hard time.
Say that again.
Why do you think they left you alone? They gave Carmen Basilio a really hard time, if I remember.
Yeah, the mob. Well, nothing I know of. Nothing I know of. But I fought Johnny Saxon, April the 1st, and then I fought, and I won the title. Then I immediately, which would have been too soon, I fought Carmen Basilio.
Right.
And I lost my championship. But, you know, it was a close fight, it was a good fight. That fight there, Carmen Basilio was considered the greatest fight of the century.
Yeah, it was only 2 months after you won the title from Saxon, so that right there tells you how different it was in your day, Tony. You know, Dennis. Yeah, go ahead. You know, you fought a lot in your time.
That's right. You know, it was a 12 round. He started me with 12 round, and then I continue on. You know, but actually, I fought eight world champions, in my career.
Yeah, that's incredible. I just found this in your bio on the internet that says you knew Frank Sinatra and Jack Ruby. So we're curious what your impressions of those two guys were, Frank Sinatra and Jack Ruby.
Frank Sinatra and Jack Ruby, there was no connection at all. But it's still we're talking about two different levels.
Exactly.
When did you meet Jack Ruby? And what did you think of him?
Jack Ruby? I didn't know too much about him, to tell you the truth. I was in Texas very briefly, you know. But nothing that I could pinpoint. And
Tony, what about Sinatra? When did you meet Frank Sinatra?
Well, I met him just briefly, actually. Went to see him, and it was a brief introduction, and I was honored, really, because Frank Sinatra was known by everybody, including me, as one of the greatest singers of all time.
Yeah.
And I was flattered, certainly was flattered.
Yeah, he was a big boxing fan, so it's no surprise that he knew you.
Yeah.
So you see, 2 months after the Saxon fight, like we were saying, you fought Basilio in the first of your 2 spectacular fights. Both went 12 rounds with TKOs. Why do you think you and Carmen Basilio, I mean, these are 2 of the best fights in the history of boxing. Why do you think you guys are such a perfect style matchup?
Well, he had an aggressive style, and I had the aggressive style. And we always stopped throwing punches and throwing them down. And unfortunately, it was Henry that went down. But that's children.
Yeah. Well, as you just said a few minutes ago, you fought 8 world champions through your career, which is amazing. When you think about your toughest opponent, who do you put on the very top of your list?
I always put Carmen Basilio.
Yeah. Why did you say that?
I fought Roger Lincoln, and he was also a phenomenal fighter. Kid Gavin, the fighters champions, because I fought England, and I fought Carmen twice too.
Tony, when you look back at your fights with Carmen Basilio, does that remind you at all of Arturo Gatti and Mickey Rourke?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure they're sort of fight, you know. Those also a challenging fight. But Carmen and I will always go down perhaps one of the greatest fights in the welterweight of the division, you know?
Yes, no question about that, yep. What's interesting to me is that you actually won 4 of your last 5 fights. Were you injured when you retired in 1964, or was your body simply telling you that it was time to quit?
Well, the last 4 fights, one shot me second round, but that was by the cuts. We not something that happened. But it was intangible, let's put it that way. And it was the last time it was killed. And then John again. And I know one most of my fights, and some of my fights I won 83 by knockout, and 25 by decision. And I'm proud of that. Well, that's basically it.
What was the largest purse you ever earned for a fight? What was the most money you made?
I really can't answer that. I've forgotten. And I think it was with the crew.
100,000.
With this solo. I don't know, I made over 100,000 a year. I can tell you the total fights that I had 1 year. And it must have been a year that I fought Basilio, but I made over 100,000.
Okay.
So, Tony, today, with the way boxing is and everything, do you watch boxing nowadays? Do you go to the fight? Do you still follow the sport?
No. Basically, there's no many fights available to see, but lastly, I watched them on television, and I love to watch the old time fighters, and some good ones, and I'm still with the program. Okay.
Yeah, and they got some pretty good welterweights these days. Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford and Keith Thurman and Showtime Sean Porter. Is there any of them is there any one of those that really impress you, or are you impressed by all of them?
Well, basically, I can always tell you just generally, rather. But there are some good fighters that are coming up in the welterweight division and the middleweight division. And, of course, I'm anxious to see the outcome of the heavyweight championships, Sure.
So what about this? This is a good question. What's it like to walk out of your condo? I'm sure this still has to happen and be recognized by a complete stranger so many years after your career has ended. It's got to make you feel good.
Well, certainly, I'm flattered. Yeah, absolutely, I'm flattered. And I'm delighted. And I'm rising also, of course. Yeah. So, and I got a book out, I want you to know that. The book that I have out is about my life's story, not only my fight, but my life in general. And the name of it,
Leonardo, right?
The boxing show. So that's good.
Yeah.
And it's doing speaking of that, it's doing well. The fight's doing well. The book is doing all right, rather. So,
last question for you, Tony. Are you a regular at the Hall of Fame booth in Santa State? Do you think try and go there most years?
No.
Do you go to the Hall of Fame every year at Santa State, or is it going to be promotional? Okay.
No.
Cool. Wow. Tony DeMarco's autobiography, which was published in 2011, is called Nardo, Memoirs of a Boxing Champion. It is a terrific read, and you can find it on Amazon. Also, as I mentioned during the intro, there is a statue of Tony DeMarco in Boston at the corner of Hanover and Cross Street. But what I didn't say is that there's only one other statue on the north end of Boston, and that one is of Paul Revere. And that should tell you a little bit about how Tony's hometown feels about him. Tony, it's been a great pleasure having you back on the Ringside Boxing Show today. Congrats on being voted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and you have a great birthday on January 14th.
Well, thank you, Tony. Also, I appreciate the call, and thank you very kindly.
Thank you, Tony. Take care.
Okay.
It's our privilege. The great Tony DeMarco, living legend and Hall of Famer on the Ringside Boxing Show, everybody. If you like the Ringside Boxing Show, do us a solid. Tell your boxing fans, about us. Spread the word and on your social media and help us grow. Also, if you haven't yet discovered the #1 website in the world for daily boxing news, what the hell are you waiting for? We update RingsideBoxingShow.com 365 days a year with the hottest stories and biggest headlines every single day. If you're a fight fan, this should be your first stop every single morning, and it might be the only boxing website you need to visit all day. Discover us right now and be amazed. RingsideBoxingShow.com. Also, I want to remind you that John and I have a book. It's called Intimate Warfare, The True Story of the Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward Boxing Trilogy. Another great epic matchup from the East Coast, just like Carmen Basilio and Tony DeMarco. It was an Amazon bestseller. It's a great stocking stuffer to the boxing fans and your family. Thanks as always to our expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwan Zaid, my partner here, John J. Responti, from British correspondent Paul McLaughlin, and another huge thanks to living legend and Hall of Famer Tony DeMarco, the former undisputed welterweight champion of the world, from an era of boxing that had just 8 weight divisions, and there was only one world champion per division back then. Unbelievable, but that's the way it was, folks. Finally, thanks to you, Ringside Nation, for being a part of our worldwide audience today. Keep your chin tucked, and we'll talk to you again next week on the Ringside Boxing Show.